Hello there, I'm Andy. This is Cocktail Mode, the podcast where me and my co-host Dave discuss a classic video game and try and pair it with a classic cocktail. Today we'll be talking about Street Fighter 2, its sequels and various iterations. I have to apologise before we start proper that the audio on this episode still isn't quite right, particularly on my side. Something we are absolutely confident we'll have fixed for next time out. It is at least not as bad as it was for the pilot episode, if you've heard that, where Dave sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. So with that said, I hope you can enjoy episode 1 of Cocktail Mode. Have we, you and I, ever had a fight on Street Fighter 2?
Many.
Have we?
I'm sure we have. We must have.
I can't remember ever having one. I was thinking about that. I've drawn a complete blank.
We must have.
we
definitely have. We definitely played a version of Street Fighter.
Yeah, I played it a lot on the SNES and the arcade.
Alpha and EX.
Yes. Oh, do you know what? I think we might have played a fair bit of EX. Because I had that and absolutely loved it. So I would have played that a lot and forced that on you, I would have thought, on the PlayStation.
Yeah, thinking back to sort of on SNES, I can't remember us playing it a lot. Mostly played NBA Jam, didn't we?
Yeah, lots of NBA Jam. I played a lot of it on the SNES and played a lot of it with other people. And as will come up later in the cocktail section, that's kind of what I based my choice of cocktail on, is the impact it had on the people I know, and it was huge, wasn't it? It was enormous as a game.
Ubiquitous is the word I would use.
Absolutely, great word. And you think about, we are obviously not going to just talk about Street Fighter 2. We're going to veer onto the alphas and the EXs and probably the 3s, the 4s, the 5s and the 6s. But Street Fighter 2 is interesting, isn't it? Because you don't think Street Fighter. When people say Street Fighter, you think Street Fighter 2, not Street Fighter, because Street Fighter was awful, and God knows how it ever got a sequel.
Yeah, that was the other thing that I came back to when I started thinking about this, is that, as we talked about last time round, Mr. Paul in Bedford had the original Street Fighter.
They did, yeah.
Which I can't remember if that was before or after Street Fighter 2 came out.
Well, it was before.
But I can remember, do you remember Huey?
Yep.
I remember him, and do you remember my mate Quang?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were really into it. They really loved it. I remember trying to play it and just thinking, this is dreadful. But then when Street Fighter 2 came along, it's like, oh my God, this is really good.
Yeah, it's interesting. And apparently fixing that, I barely played Street Fighter. I don't think I played it originally in the arcade. I've tried it since, but not for long.
I played the original Street Fighter in an arcade in Cornwall with the punch pads.
Ooh, how to make a bad game worse.
Yeah, which was dreadful. I'd have only been like 10. It's just like, what the hell is that? I'll have a go. I saw
it once. I've never played it on the punch pads, but I saw it, but it was broken. They weren't actually working, but it was really important, I guess, because fireballs and stuff like that didn't really exist in fighting games. But apparently, one of the reasons why it's so bad is because the input is really tight. So your input for a fireball, it has to be frame perfect. And by opening that up, that's what eventually led to the accidental creation of combos. Let's not pretend that, it went out to market and someone said, oh look, this thing's got combos, and the entire development team didn't realise, because of course they did, but they didn't do it on purpose. And
came out in testing.
But it was one of those things that, that was because they were trying to widen the inputs so people could play it and not die of frustration more than anything else. And you're right, they did have it in Mr. Paul.
No one ever played it, but yeah, it was there.
No, it was sat right at the back, wasn't it? Sort of square onto where the snooker tables were.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Isn't it weird what you remember?
Yeah, I can remember the layout of that place really well.
God, I think if anyone wants to know more about Mr. Pool in Bedford, listen to the pilot episode that's up, because we go on at length about the various arcades of Bedford in that one. But Mr. Pool, I think until the Mega Bowl opened, which is new to listeners, because that was after all the... Was it after all the others shut down, or when they're just on the decline?
I think there may have been some crossover
Yeah, because there's that whole new cinema complex opened, and there was the Mega Bowl, which had arcade machines in it, and the Zap Zone, which was mostly arcades.
The Zap Zone was amazing.
The Zap Zone is where I first saw Street Fighter 2. It's where I first played a Street Fighter 2 arcade machine.
Yeah. I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think I played it in the travelling fair that came around first. Because I could definitely remember playing it in the sort of weird porta cabin arcades that they used to have at those things. Just a massive crowd of people watching it as well. So if anybody was any good, it'd be a real experience, which I used to love. And that's one of the reasons I used to love arcades. If you were good at a game, you'd just get people watching you. Yeah,
you really would. And I think when the Street Fighter was, you'd get people watching, then you'd get someone want to play it. You can put their coin on the screen, wouldn't they? Put it up against the glass and get in line. But yeah, I always bottled it when that happened. If I was doing well enough for anyone to challenge me, I always bottled it when someone that I didn't know come up. I was a lot shyer back then. So
I was going to say, you'd have been about, what, 16, 17? Oh, well, 91 was the original release of the game to arcades. We wouldn't have got it until 92, at least.
Yeah, so that I'd have been 17, 17, 18.
Yeah.
Which ties in with, bunking off school and going to the arcades. So fits well. I remember sort of reading about Street Fighter 2 before I ever saw it, which is quite rare for me, because I never read a lot of magazines. Sort of very, very specifically reading about how the sequel to Street Fighter was coming, and it had a character who was an Indian rubber mat. That's what I remember, those specific words, and being like, oh my god, how are they going to do that? It's just insanity. It doesn't make any sense.
I can remember at the time I used to read a magazine called Computer and Video Games.
Oh, the best in the UK. Multi-format, at least.
And because that used to cover arcades and everything that was out, they would come up with things like that way ahead of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew about it before I played it, but didn't quite appreciate how much money I was going to spend on it.
Yeah, I think it took us all by surprise. I think that obviously changed the landscape, because until that point there wasn't any one-on-one fighting games in arcades at all. They existed.
Well, there were,
seen one before.
But they were terrible.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I found out while researching this. But also as well, it was responsible for a massive resurgence in the industry on the whole.
Yeah,
like arcades were dying apparently.
Yeah, they're very much on the downturn, which is weird considering it took them another decade. But basically, Street Fighter 2 gave them that decade.
Yeah.
And Dreamcast took it away.
Well, you say the Dreamcast. Probably the PS2, more likely.
We don't talk about PS2 on this podcast, mate. It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
Until you pick a PS2 game to play.
We're not doing it.
To talk about.
No.
Oh, okay.
It's outside our remit.
Well, it's not. 1999.
Nope. 2000 it came out.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, I know when Street Fighter came out, I was just... As far as I can remember, the first film I saw at the new cinema, where the Zap Zone and the Mega Bowl were, was Batman Returns. Because I'm pretty sure the last film I saw at the old cinema, the Granada, was Batman. I thought it was quite... at the time, I remember thinking it was quite ironic that the last film I saw, that one was Batman, and the next one was Batman Returns. So yeah, Aspects would have opened summer 92. If not a little bit earlier than that. That
kind of fits, doesn't it? I have from that old Bedford cinema the one of what I guess or perhaps one of the press packs they got for Batman.
Yeah,
and it was Laurie Duffy's nan used to work there. Hi Laurie, if you're listening, you're probably not, but if you are, hi.
Or his nan.
Yeah, always very much doubt his nan is. But there's so it's just like a little Batman folder, and it's got some black and white pictures in it and some like a little blurb of the film. It's quite cool. Up in my loft.
Yeah, nice.
And, it's a cool thing to have. Yeah, luckily you chose Street Fighter 2, so I assume you are a fan.
I did, and I am a fan, and I still pick it up every now and then. I'll play the SNES version, ironically, even though I've got access to the arcade original.
Mm.
The SNES is the version that is closest to my heart, bizarrely, because I did spend hundreds of pounds playing Street Fighter 2 in the Zap Zone almost exclusively, but also weirdly enough in various off licenses around Bedford.
Yeah,
it was the resurgence of little shops and like roadside cafes having arcade cabinets back.
Did you ever come across any of the bootleg versions?
I did at the fair. So it wouldn't have been the year it came out. It would have been probably a year, maybe two after that. But I remember didn't really play it much because it was just so confusing. But I remember standing there watching someone play it, and I think it was Ken versus Guile, and Ken would basically jump into midair, then do like 3 fireballs while in midair. Meanwhile, Guile's doing like an infinite somersault kick in the corner of the screen. Oh, fuck.
I remember someone coming back from lunch when we were at school at Bunyan and saying that there was a version at a chip shop nearby where when Zangief did his spinning clothesline thing, fireballs came out of it. And you're just like, okay. But there was apparently loads and loads of it. And I think it's probably led... I mean, there's one called Rainbow Edition, which is the most famous, and apparently by pressing the start button, you switch characters to another random character at any point in the fight.
I like the idea of that.
I think it'd be useful if you could find a way to actually choose which character. Yeah. But I guess that's really what tag mode did in lots of other late fighting games.
Yeah.
Brought in, and
it's probably the genesis of that idea.
Yeah, could well have been, couldn't it? I mean, Street Fighter, there's so many ideas. It could well, because when you play a tag mode on your own, you take control of the player that's tagged in, and then you can tag them out. I played quite a lot of Dead or Alive, that series, and the tag mode in that. You can do some ridiculous combos by tagging in and out. Mind you can do some ridiculous combos anyway.
I was going to say, the game itself is pretty ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah, I can't believe it's still going. It definitely peaked at 4.
Oh, I don't know. I think it peaked with the volleyball spin-off, didn't it? Surely.
That's high art, my friend. High art. I think because there were apparently lots and lots of these bootleg versions about, and I think that it contributes to this idea that there are hundreds of versions of Street Fighter. People get, Street Fighter 2, the sequel, and Street Fighter 2 Part Super Turbo Hyper Fighting, and there was only 8 versions of it, and 3 of them are from very recently, comeback versions, and it's always had this reputation of being a game that come from basically, whoring, basically just beating with the money stick. But there was there was Street Fighter 2. When you say playing the NES version, by the way, SNES version, by the way, to come back to that, you do mean Turbo, right?
No, I mean Street Fighter 2.
Oh, mate. That was painfully slow.
Yeah, I know. I remember.
Have you played it recently?
Yes, I like it. It's probably my favourite version.
I mean, it's unplayably slow. I don't know how you do that.
It's the version I've always enjoyed the most.
Yeah, well, it was sort of my introduction to it.
I'd played it a ton. I'd played it a ton in the arcades, and then very few people had it because I don't know if you remember, but when it came out, it was like 90 quid. Yeah, it was horrifically expensive.
Well, I remember I only played it. On the SNES at James Bristow's house, and that's how I became friends with James Bristow, by playing Street Fighter 2.
Just turned up at his house one day. Excuse me, I've heard you've got Street Fighter 2 on the SNES.
I don't even know how. I generally don't even know how it came about, but it got to the point where pretty much every day after school I would get off the bus at James's stuff and go around his house. Yeah. And we'd play Street Fighter 2 until about 9 o'clock at night, which in those days, was time to go home. Mm-hmm. And way beyond that sometimes. But yeah, it was as you say, ubiquitous. It seemed like an important thing to do. I can't remember now playing anything else at James Bristow's house until Street Fighter 2 Turbo came out, and then we played that instead. And then that had the thing where, I don't know if you remember, as you say, you played mostly the normal one, but on Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the speed setting, I think it could only go up to 4 if you just plugged the game in, and you had to input a key combo during the loading screen for it to go up to 10.
Oh, okay.
If we had an audience that could write in and complain, I've probably got that a little bit wrong, but it's something along those lines.
Are you saying that we haven't got an audience, or haven't got an audience that can read and write?
I'm saying B.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah.
No, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column 1.
I've completely forgotten what I was saying now. Yeah, sorry. You had to input a key combination on the joypad, and it was pretty much, I think it went around most of the buttons, like at least once, and you had to do it in about a second.
Yeah.
It was such a tiny window you had to do it in. It played a little tune.
I vaguely remember it.
A big leap from 2 to what's called, hyper fighting, which is turbo on the SNES. I think they're pretty much the same thing. Because, okay, you've got the new characters, but you've already seen the new characters if you've played the game to any extent.
Yeah, but when Championship Edition or Champion Edition, whichever one it is, came out and you could actually play those guys. Ooh,
yeah.
Big news, that was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it turned out Balrog was rubbish. If we do have any international listeners, by the way, what is that naming thing all about? It is.
I read up on this. I know this.
Is the Mike Tyson thing true?
It is the Mike Tyson thing, but it's the opposite of what I always thought it was.
Right.
Because I always thought that the Americans renamed him to Bison to coincide with Tyson.
Oh, okay.
But it's the opposite of that. He was called Bison in Japan, and Capcom USA, or when they started to ship it over, said no, we'll have to change that because if we get sued, because that's too close to Tyson, so we'll shuffle the names around.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because the story I always remember hearing at the time was they've renamed him in America to make it rhyme with Tyson.
Yes. There was a character called Mike in Street Fighter 1 who was a black guy who was a boxer. And then he looks pretty similar to who we think of as Balrog, so then it became M. Bison. So I think the link is there if somebody did want to sue. I'm not sure they'd win, but I don't why have the fight when you can just confuse everyone from Japan, whoever picks up a Western version of Street Fighter 2. But they shifted them around, didn't they? Cause
Vega, we think of as Vega with the claws, was originally Balrog.
Yeah, that's right.
Bison was
Vega. Yeah.
Sagat's always been Sagat.
Sagat has always been Sagat. All this cheesy glory and those goddamn fireballs. The progress for a while it was really fast. I'd say the first one was slow and there were 8 characters. I mean, 8 characters even was incredible. But
and no game had a character selection like it.
No, nothing at all. Still to this day, one of my favourite fighting games was Way of the Exploding Fist on the Spectrum, and that came out in 86.
Great game.
86 that came out, and Arcade Plus not long after.
Arcade Plus was brilliant.
Yeah. So
there was international karate in between the two.
Yeah, so I mean, there was again, fighting games were about and very popular. It's just they weren't as anywhere near as complex.
My original favourite arcade game was a game called Karate Champ, which you played with 2 joysticks, no buttons. So it's just combinations of like left stick for movement, right stick for action.
Oh yeah.
And various combinations would do sort of somersaults and back and front kicks and things like that. I loved that game.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
I remember Kung Fu Master, but that was rubbish.
Yeah, I love Kung Fu Master.
Lots of people do. I never liked it ever. I remember playing it at arcade and hating it, playing it at home and hating it.
It's your Pac-Man.
It is, yeah.
Because I used to love that and I was quite good at it.
Yeah. It just really annoyed me how you kicked and then 3 people fell over because they were vaguely nearby. It used to upset me.
Clearly you've never kicked anyone hard enough. That probably happens in real life.
But I think, Way of the Exploding Fist, you talk about Karate Champ and that, I don't think I've played it. But Way of the Exploding Fist was an 8-directional thing, and then the fire button. So you had sort of pretty much 16 moves at your disposal, and that was mind-blowing. 16 moves. Probably not even that, because you've got to walk backwards and forwards. And then, Street Fighter comes along, and then Street Fighter 2 in quick succession, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing. There is an original Game Boy version of Street Fighter 2 that came out eventually. But I think it may have been in CVG, possibly Mean Machines, one of the multi-format magazines, when the idea of Street Fighter 2 on a Game Boy seemed like a ridiculous concept. They said that it was coming to the Game Boy and was going to have an add-on where it added an extra 4 buttons to the controller so you could do all the moves.
Yeah.
Which obviously turned out to be an April Fool's joke. But what a fantastic idea. I want to make that happen. Some hacker out there, make that happen. A little add-on for the Game Boys. But the Game Boy versions of Street Fighter 2 evolved with a sort of long, short press kind of thing. So you tap for a right punch. And by the time, I think it was Alpha 2, maybe, one of the alphas on the Game Boy Color, it was really, really playable, right? Really surprisingly playable, and they even downscaled the graphics so they had their own little unique style. But it's a really, really good game. I've got a lot of time for the Game Boy Color because of the graphical style that it pretty much enforces you to have. It makes things look really cool.
Yeah, when you've got a very sort of definite design limitation, sometimes you can work better within that, can't you?
Yeah.
Rather than just saying, go nuts, do what you want.
The Game Boy Color had a version of Cannon Fodder on it.
Oh, I love Cannon Fodder.
What a game.
Brilliant game.
But yeah, it's incredible. It's got one of those games that for a while was ridiculously expensive. But it's amazing how playable it is in the Game Boy Color, considering the size of the screen and what you have to do. Obviously, I don't think every single level is on there, but yeah, the plucky little Game Boy Color and its various versions of Street Fighter 2, or Street Fighter, I should say, because I think there's more alpha than the first. Do you play much of the alphas? I
don't remember ever owning it. I remember playing it a bit at yours and possibly borrowing it for a little while, but
yeah. I think that Street Fighter Alpha 3, which I think is called Street Fighter 03 in Japan. Street Fighter Alpha 3 or 03, I think, is in competition with Soul Blade for the best single player mode in a fighting game.
Ooh, now there's an interesting subject. Because I would put almost to the top of that list Bushido Blade. Well, yes, that's an incredibly good shout. That was a brilliant, weirdly linked gameplay areas that you remember when you used to run from one area to another. Yeah. It's one of those bizarre situations where the way to get the best ending was to avoid about 50% of the fights. I'm going to go and jump down this well and then run away from a fight and then run away from another fight and then there's a guy with a gun, for fuck's sake. And then, it's a fantastic game. And again, it probably only exists because Street Fighter 2 existed. Yeah, I was wondering that actually. If Street Fighter 2 didn't come out and wasn't the big success it was, would we have had the massive wave of similar games that followed it? I think whether you like it or not, and we're all grown, making video games isn't done for free. People want to make money. So when Street Fighter 2 comes out and steals all my pocket money for about 7 years, I don't know about you, it's people are going to take notice of that and try and mimic it and do things. So let's do Street Fighter but with blood and call it Mortal Kombat. Let's do Street Fighter in 3D and call it Virtua Fighter. And that's what it was. It's sort of thing, it's like how everyone's nan always calls every console a PlayStation. It's like every fighting game is a Street Fighter. So Yu Suzuki admits that Virtua Fighter wouldn't have happened without the success of Street Fighter 2. Yeah. And I think if anyone else was being honest, they would say exactly so. Oh, the Tekken guy as well. What's his name? Harada. No idea. I'm not big on game designers at all. No, I mean I only am with the Japanese ones because they are more. The way the Japanese industry works is much more aligned to directors and films than it is anywhere else. So other than you've got the Street Fighter 2 and the 8 versions of that. 5. I don't like it because there's newer versions and they don't really count. Although did you see the one they redid the graphics on? The Udon Studios redid all the visuals. No. It's really, really pretty.
Can't remember for the life of me which version it is. Let's have a look. I did take some notes. It is the piffily named Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix.
PS3, Xbox 360.
Yeah, all that sort of era. A few different.
Sold 250,000 copies worldwide.
Is that
Not that I've got the Wikipedia page.
No.
I tell you what is interesting. Street Fighter 2 Game Boy. How many copies do you think sold?
I don't know. Tell me.
17,000.
Wow.
That's a very, very small amount.
That's a very small amount.
That's very, very low.
I mean, it did come late in its life.
Did it?
Yeah, it did. And it was, and you're saying 2 buttons rather than 6 is a little bit of a step down. Yeah, I could almost see that being right. What will tell you is how expensive it is to buy now, because if it only sold 17,000 and they only made slightly more than that, it will cost an absolute fortune.
It's the sort of thing that you never know, you're never really aware of at the time that this will become rare.
No.
It's like the thing I always say about collector's items, anything that's sold to be a collector's item will not be a collector's item.
Have I told you my Res story?
I think so. Is this where you had it on the PS2 and the Dreamcast, and one version's worth like 150 quid or something?
Yeah, so the Dreamcast version of Res certainly was. I don't know what it is now, but it was up in the hundreds to buy. And I once walked past the bargain bin of Game with it sitting pretty much on top for a £5.
Yeah.
But I had no money. Literally zero money, which is an impossible thing because you've always got you can just go into your bank app and get yourself an overdraft these days, can't you? And I think it was the concept of just not having access to £5 in any way, shape or form. It's just so bizarre now. But yeah, I was literally walking home because I couldn't afford a bus and walked past that and just went, oh man, and then walked off. And then so we mentioned briefly the EX. There were 3 Street Fighter EX games. Mm-hmm. We played the first one a lot.
I can remember the training room where you kind of had the command list and you had to go through and perfect everything. Yeah, I never did. I'd get like 4 or 5 down and just think, I can't be arsed.
I love about Street Fighter EX more than EX2 and 3, obviously, because the graphics got better. They're on the PS2, EX is on the PS1. The PS1 version was like, what do they call it, low poly. Everything was very obviously geometric shapes, and that's an art style that I adore. So I was a big fan of Street Fighter EX. It was a bit. I doubt it gets played much on the professional circuit, is all I can say, because I think it was not like a technically polished experience, but it was just so cool, and everybody was a viable character. I don't think there were any charged characters in the game at all.
It's hard to do in 3D, isn't it?
Yeah, but I also think it just makes the whole game much more energetic, and it sort of almost eliminates turtling by design.
Yeah.
It's just, I'd say I love the look of it, I love the energy of it, and I just love the absolute mania of chaining together super moves, which was something completely new. Again, it was, at the time you got Super Street Fighter 2 gave you super moves, but being able to chain 3 of them together, it's like, what on earth is going on? But I was in New Zealand in 2001, very early 2001, and I was in Auckland and just wandering about Auckland on my own, and went into an arcade. And there's 2 things with Street Fighter that I remember in this one arcade. One that is the Street Fighter 2 cabinets, probably New Challengers or whatever. One of the more further advanced versions of Street Fighter 2 were back to back, so they only had one screen and one set of controls, and then on the other side somebody else had one screen and one set of controls, but you were fighting each other.
So basically cocktail mode.
Yeah, pretty much. Nice. Like it.
a hacked together cocktail mode.
Yeah, and it was really cool. I remember not even realising what was going on until I put my money in, and it come up with, here comes a new challenger, and the bloke on the other side sort of peered over at me and went, huh. I was like, oh, sorry mate, I didn't realise. But the other thing was, right near the doorway they had Street Fighter EX, I think 3, possibly 2, and it was I was playing along with that for a bit and sort of getting used to it, because it wasn't. I'd only ever played Street Fighter at the time, and some geezer would come in and put his money in it, and we had an epic battle. A proper 3-all epic showdown, and that was when, as you were talking about earlier, getting a crowd around you. I sort of, he beat me in the last round because I whiffed again chaining together 3 super moves, because I didn't know what the third one was, because I'd never played the bloody game before. So I should have beat him, but whiffed that. And he looked at me afterwards. He went, I don't know what happened. I went, I didn't know the move, didn't know what to do. But and we turned around, and there was literally a crowd blocking the door, and we were like, "Yeah, let's strut out, check us out." But yeah, it was a proper epic showdown with some random New Zealand kid.
Nice.
Yeah, and probably my best Street Fighter story, because I was always sort of half decent at Street Fighter 2, but never brilliant at it. It's one of those things, you've mentioned a few names here, but are you playing it around James's house and then going and sort of playing it out in the wild and meeting other people from school, like Huey and Jack Land and all the people we've mentioned last time, because of Street Fighter 2? I mean, when does that happen? I mean, to be fair, let's not be reductive. I bet there are people who've got internet friends from playing Fortnite and whatever. Probably. Oh
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
that's how people meet these days.
A complete random, non-segue. We need to play a drinking game bingo for our what's the word we're looking for? Our beautifully curated selection of listeners. Every time one of us says "these days," you got to take a drink. Every single time. I'm sorry for your liver. Please don't pass me your doctor's bills. But yeah. These days, and every time Dave says "I've heard of it," that's another one. But yeah, these days drinking game. Yeah. So what have we done? We've done 2. We've done a bit of Alpha. We've done a bit of EX. What else has there been? I mean, I guess we're on to 3, aren't we?
I never played 3.
Did
ever.
You? Not any
in any form. Never played it.
Wow. It's one of those things. It was sort of the start. I mean, I'm of the opinion that the odd numbered Street Fighters aren't as good as the even numbered Street Fighters.
Oh god, it's like the Star Trek film thing all over again. Was it 3 that introduced DJ and T-Hawk and...
No, that's Super Street Fighter 2.
Turbo.
So Super Street... Yes. But yeah, Super Street Fighter 2 is probably, I think, definitely my favourite version of Street Fighter 2, possibly my favourite Street Fighter full stop. Because I think as much as there were those iterations and things were getting better, those new characters just were doing new things in the game that hadn't been seen before. They were. I also really liked, because I'm to my shame a little bit patriotic, I liked that Cammy was British. Because you didn't get many British
characters. Nothing to be ashamed of.
But it has long been identified that patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel.
I knew you were going to come out with that.
I know, and you would think, well, if you time adjust the word scoundrel, it's basically fuckwit. But
oh dear, I do like fuckwit.
Yeah, but yeah, I love that Cammy was British. I love Fei Long was a great character as well. He had some very cool moves. I say Cammy was British. In the Alpha game, she became Greek for a little while.
Really?
Yeah, she lost her memory. The whole storyline thing of the Street Fighter game.
Oh yeah, I hate it when that happens. You wake up one day and just think you're Greek.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what the Greek for yes is then, and it's completely escaped me.
I don't know Greek for anything. Name another Greek video game character.
Kratos in God of War.
Oh, I was going Sophitia from Soul Blade.
Oh, what a great character she was as well.
Yeah.
She had that kick you in the nuts move.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the fact that she said, "I'm sorry if you were a male character and didn't if you were female." So she apologises for kick you in the nuts, but not in the lady region.
Yeah. To be fair, it's the lesser of two evils. Her weapon is a sword.
Good point.
If you're in a fight with somebody with a sword and she kicks you in the nuts, I'm going to take the sorry. I will take the apology and stop fighting.
That single player mode thing, you were right, Bushido Blade, it is an incredible single player mode. and it's just the restrictions it places on you and what you are and aren't allowed to do. Like, you can't stab someone from behind, and you're not allowed to throw dust in their eyes, and all these moves you've learned, you suddenly say, no, you can't do that anymore. And then you've got Soul. I always think the single player in Soul Blade, Soul Edge, that was it, Soul Blade and Soul Edge was what it was called. Again, this whole name change thing. I always thought that single player mode was better, and again, I think it's one of those things that probably is open to abuse, because Huang, he had that, his special sword was about 8 meters long and invisible. Yep. And it's basically stuff that you think would come from a bootleg version of the game that they just cranked it. I just thought it was incredible, and I thought better than what happened later on in the Soul Calibur series. It was just, you had 8 runs you had to do to unlock all the swords with every single character.
Yeah. And
then there were 2 different endings. And again, to tie together the two, in the end of Mitsurugi's, you were up against a gun in his ending.
Yeah, dodge it and attack, wasn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, even though Street Fighter Alpha 3 has got this sort of almost RPG level of customization you can apply to your character as you go through. So it's a long story mode, and then you can apply things like you can I can't remember what any of the things actually were now, but it's like you can your meter will recharge quicker. So it's the really sort of RPG elements that normally I despise in games.
I was going to say, surely this is the sort of shit you hate.
Oh no, I should hate it. I really should. But what I really like is fighting games, and what I really don't have enough of in my life anymore, and for a long time, is the ability to play against anybody in a fighting game. Other than online, I played a lot of Dead or Alive 4 online, but I'm not a big online player. But so the ability for a good quality one-on-one fighting game to have a really good one-player mode is brilliant. I loved it, and I think Alpha 3 did it like almost to perfection. I mean, it's no Tekken Bowl, don't get me wrong, but
Tekken Bowl. Is that bowling with Tekken?
Oh, absolutely, my friend.
We're back to Dead or Alive volleyball games now, aren't we?
That whole RPG thing that I shouldn't be a fan of. Street Fighter 6 was praised incredibly for its single player mode and how in depth it was and what was that. And I tried it. Too RPG for me. I can't play it.
Yeah, I think I've got that and never played it.
Yeah, I picked up a physical version just because I'm a bit of a
hipster. Soul Calibur 6, I've got that as well. Never played it.
Oh wow! It went downhill very quickly after. I mean, I didn't even like 2 very much. But
I'd never played any of them. I played the first one. Quite a lot on the Dreamcast. Never got 2. 3, 4, 5, 6 came out on Steam.
Yeah.
So I got it because it was like, I think I got it for nothing actually, for some weird reason.
I think because it didn't sell very well and they're trying to get rid of it. That's not how it works with digital releases, is it? But
no. I've got Street Fighter 5 and I've never played it.
So yeah, so Street Fighter 5 I played a little bit of and wasn't a fan of. I did play it early and it had a lot of problems early in the launch, but it was enough to put me off. And I think perhaps also that thing I said earlier about thinking perhaps that the odd numbered games aren't as good as the even numbered games. I mean, it's not. I mean, I don't know how the developments are. I've not really paid that much attention to it, but it happens with the Call of Duty games, doesn't it? And whether you personally like them or not, you can tell there is a difference between the odd-numbered ones and the even-numbered ones. They're clearly developed by different studios. But I think there's sort of a lineage there, isn't there? I think there's when you think about how Street Fighter 2 introduced that sort of two-player competitive thing in a broad way. Obviously it existed beforehand, but it was the first big deal. I think Modern Warfare, as much as it's a very different sort of game, would have been lots of people's introduction to online gaming.
Yeah, maybe. Actually, I would say probably before that, I would say a lot of people's intro would have been Halo. Halo on the Xbox was hugely influential.
Yeah. Probably
Halo 2 more than the first one, I think. I'm not a big fan of the series, so I'm not really keyed up on
I'm not. I found, you probably know this about me, but I hate tonal inconsistency. I hate where something doesn't know quite what it is. And I played the first Halo, and it has exactly that. It's got this really serious, po-faced characters and campaign and that, and then little gibbery, squeaky comedy aliens.
Yeah, it's it's the Americanized versions of Japanese anime. It's like Battle of the Planets.
Oh God.
Adding a shitty, squeaky little character to make the kids like it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, I hate that sort of thing, and I know that's a personal thing, but I just hate. Just decide what you are. If you try and be two things, it's just I hate it. So yeah, we skipped ahead there, but yeah, 6 has apparently got a really in-depth Street Fighter. We're talking about again. Street Fighter 6 has apparently got a really in-depth. I played a little bit of it, and it's got.
Don't you just basically make a character?
Yeah.
And decide their moveset and everything.
And then you train and add movesets as you go. And you know, it's the sort of thing that I imagine is very popular and a lot of people like, but it's just a bit too RPG for me. I like character creators quite a lot. I used to spend hours in the character creator on Saints Row 3.
Oh yeah.
Of all things. But I made Street Fighter characters. I made Cammy, and I made Fei Long, and I made the characters I like. I made a Ryu, and I used to do the same. I mean, this is how much I think Street Fighter sort of has permeated the thing. I remember having football teams on, I don't think it was Sensible Soccer. Oh no, it wasn't. It was hockey teams on one of the NHL games, one of the SNES NHL games, where you could build your own team and renaming them after Street Fighter characters.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, and it was everywhere. It permeated to the extent that, cringe alert, the movie got made.
I was hoping we weren't going to bring that up.
Have you seen it? Have you actually watched it from start to finish?
I think I have, but blotted it out of my memory. So I must have seen the whole thing through at least once.
So I remember at the time, and I think at the time is probably the only defence I have for this line of conversation.
Is this going to be Kylie?
Of course it's going to be Kylie, Dave. I was besotted with Kylie, like absolutely, like as far as I'm concerned, she was the perfect human being, and part of that being, objectification alert. She had a fantastic arse, and then you cast her as Cammy, a character who is famous for her arse, and Kylie Minogue wears trousers the entire way through the film. Just that's. You've missed the point there, my friend. Your casting agent did a job for you, and you missed the point. But yeah, that's the least bad thing about it. Oh, it's such a bad film, and it's not just bad because old Street Fighter films should be good. It's not in complete isolation. It's terrible.
It's one of the things that always really, really annoys me is when people say, "Oh, it's so bad, it's good." About anything, not necessarily films, just anything in general.
Yeah.
And nobody has ever said it's so bad it's good. It's just shit.
Yeah.
Just nobody who thinks it's good.
But the other side of that is, why don't you you're trying to hide the fact that you like something. So I know that you and I both love Flash Gordon.
Oh, of course.
People quite often describe Flash Gordon as a so bad it's good film. It's not. It's a so good it's good film. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it to call it bad. It's just a thing that people think, oh, because it's not technically exceptional, then we have to say it's so bad it's good. It's nonsense.
I suppose the other phrase that goes hand in hand with it is guilty pleasure.
Yeah. Fuck that noise.
Flash Gordon's not a guilty pleasure. Flash Gordon's just pleasurable.
Yeah, I don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
Apart from one of the Muti scenes, I might feel a little bit guilty about that.
No, I don't feel guilty at all. I've had 44 years to get over the feelings I have for that scene.
I'm going to describe the scene because I've always wanted to do this. I hope there's somebody listening to us that hasn't seen Flash Gordon. I'm going to tell you there is a scene where there is a girl handcuffed face down to a table, getting whipped while her father watches eating popcorn. You need to watch Flash Gordon. It's a masterpiece.
Is he eating popcorn? I thought he was drinking like wine or something.
He's eating a snack of some kind. Is it just?
I thought it was a drink.
Oh, we'll have to answer that question next time.
To be fair, the details I take away from that scene aren't what is in Max von Stydow's hand.
Wasn't Street Fighter the movie Raul Julia's last film?
Yes.
What a legacy.
Yeah.
God bless him. But yeah, there was of course another Street Fighter film, wasn't there?
Well, there was an animated one. Dreadful, awful. Do you remember what like mid-90s anime? Well, I won't even call it anime. It was manga because that's what we called it at the time.
We did, yeah.
Because we didn't know any better.
I knew nothing about it other than the fact that Akira was a masterpiece. Rusian Z was also pretty good, and Fist of the North Star is one of the best arcade games I've ever played. That's my manga experience in a nutshell. That's it. But do you remember we played Fist of the North Star in Trocadero, didn't we?
Yeah. The one and only time I've ever seen it. I did once find it on eBay for about $8,000.
Yeah. It's one of those games that I think we mentioned this last time. If you're going to have an arcade game in a home arcade, then Fist of the North Star. I've got no interest in the manga at all, but what a brilliant game! It basically, Punch Out ×6 with screaming and breaking stuff. Just incredible. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was great fun. Yeah, just Google Fist of the North Star arcade machine. You'll see what we're talking about.
Have you seen the video of Street Fighter 3? It's like the seminal Street Fighter 3 competition moment. You've not seen it?
Probably not.
I mean, the reason I asked is because it's one of those things that felt at the time like games were going to break the mainstream. Every now and again something happens and you think games are going to become mainstream. And they've sort of crawled that way, but it always felt like breakthrough moments along the way.
Unless you live in South Korea.
In
which case, StarCraft is the national sport. And has been for 20 years.
There's a video of there's a Japanese fighter called Daigo Umehara, again, apologies for the pronunciation, and an American, I think he's actually American-Japanese, but an American guy called Justin Wong. And they play Street Fighter 3 in very different ways. Justin Wong was famously a turtle character. Umehara was basically the Iceman. He'd absolutely wear you down with his skills and what he knew and what he could do. Again, I don't know if you know, but Street Fighter 3 had a parry. It wasn't just block, you could parry as well.
Oh, okay.
So by pressing forward at the exact time, you could parry, and the parry didn't affect your health, because obviously blocking a move wears your health down very slightly. Yeah. But tapping parry at the exact time, it negates all health. And this fight's very much going Justin Wong's way, and he launches a super move right at the end, knowing that just by blocking it, he's gonna. Even if he blocks it, he's gonna win. And it's like a cheese
victory.
I think it's like a 17-hit super move, and Daigo parries every single one of them. It's incredible. It's like boof, 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 and then there's a pause, boof, 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 and another pause, boof, and another one, boof, boof, and then launches his own attack and beats him. And honestly, thinking about it's actually giving me a little bit of goosebumps.
You'd be fucking livid, wouldn't you? You thought you'd done it. Yeah. And then he does that. Yeah.
And the reason I think it kind of struck home is, a bit about Street Fighter. I think you could show that to somebody at Street Fighter and explain what you have to do to perform a single parry, and then show them that, and they would go, "Fucking hell!" I played a bit of Street Fighter 3 on the Dreamcast, and if I got one parry, I was a happy boy. It was a very difficult thing to do.
I'm gonna make my obligatory Dark Souls reference, and say that the parrying in that is a skill, a real skill to learn. It takes just perfect timing and knowing the timing of what's coming at you.
You have to be fast as lightning.
And be very, very frightening. Yeah.
So I think we've mentioned every Street Fighter game except Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, well, I've been sat here for about the last hour thinking at some point he's going to stop talking. And I'll say something like, actually, my favourite version of Street Fighter was Street Fighter 4.
And you know what? I think you might be right. I think I love Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Or some people call it Turbo Street Fighter 2, but Super Street Fighter 2.
I think it's one of those things where the text on the box doesn't quite match up with how you would say it sometimes.
The game that's battling for that is whatever the final version of Street Fighter 4 was. Because
Ultra Arcade something or other.
I think there was Arcade Edition, and after that there was Ultra. I think Ultra is the last one, but what a rebirth that was.
It is brilliant.
By bringing it somehow captured everything that was great about Street Fighter 2 and evolved it without making you feel like you're an idiot for not knowing what was going on. It was the perfect balance, and I think that's what Street Fighter 2 had. It was this. I think there was a bit of everyone's a novice, and so everyone was learning at the same pace originally. But also, you could have a go at Street Fighter 2, and as long as you understood the basic concepts, and it was more about timing and what you did, and so I think anyone could play it. I think Street Fighter 3 was too complicated. The alpha games were too complicated to achieve that, but Street Fighter 4 nailed it. If you'd played Street Fighter 2, you could pick up Street Fighter 4 and be decent.
Yeah.
Straight off the bat, even if you'd not played it for 20 years.
Yeah, that was pretty much my experience of it. First time I played it, I think probably Xbox 360.
Yeah.
I would imagine, around someone's house. They're like, "Oh, do you want to play Street Fighter?" I'm like, "Oh, fuck yeah."
Yeah.
It's been like 20 years, but I'll give it a crack.
Yeah.
And just instantly, the fireballs, dragon punches, everything just flowed.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, they've probably changed the timings and things to be a bit more lenient, like you were saying about earlier on, but it just instantly, I knew how to play it.
Yeah.
There was no learning at all required.
And it's one of those really brilliant integrations of it's not 3D, but the integration of that almost 3D. I don't want to say 2.5D because it's not that either, but they're very clearly 3D models, but they very clearly handle like 2D models.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sort of the reason why it works. Because obviously there were millions of 3D games that came out between Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4. And
one or two.
Yeah, but none of them felt as crisp as that did. And it's always like it is 3D, but it's not. And the reason it's not is because it works better when it is.
Doesn't need to be.
No, absolutely. But yeah, it's a brilliant game. And it's stunning to look at as well, Street Fighter 4. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And even was 20 years ago when it came out, probably not quite, but
it can't be that far, surely.
Well, 360 came out 2007, didn't it? And I don't think it was far behind. Tap tap tapper, Dave's on Wikipedia again.
Tap tap tap. No, I'm on Steam actually.
It was definitely before that.
February 2009.
There we go. So what's that?
It's 15 years old.
15 years old. That's a fully grown human being.
Or a very old dog.
Or a really good whiskey.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've ruined my segue. I said...
I'm so sorry.
Can you go back to... Just say 15 years ago and I'll mention something about whiskey and then I go, oh, talking of alcohol, and we can finally get to the fucking cocktails.
Yes, I was thinking that we should probably talk about cocktails at some point.
On the cocktails thing, I know you struggled a bit, Dave.
I did. I spent far too much time reading up on Street Fighter 2, playing it, enjoying it, and didn't really put much thought into what cocktail it could possibly translate to.
Just want to stop and say Street Fighter 2 is an absolute masterpiece. And I did the same. I fired up my Evercade because on the version of the Evercade I got the Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting built in. But I hadn't quite played it. I'd never gone around seeing how it played on that. 4 hours later, I'm like, shit, I should be working. I think I might have missed a meeting. It's just such a great game. And let's not do our task in this part of the podcast is to think about that game and try and pair it with a cocktail or just an alcoholic drink of our choice. And yeah, Dave admitted to me before we started that he'd struggled a bit, so I'll let you go first, mate.
I didn't just struggle a bit, I didn't do my homework. There's no skirting around the issue.
Can I just point out this is our official first episode and basically
I didn't bother. So I was thinking something that either is massively representative of the era, so sort of the early 90s, which were just a very, very strange time to live through.
It really was.
Yeah, pre-internet, but just great memories of that era. I wanted something that's just, I mean, the big thing I take away from Street Fighter 2 is the range of characters. Like there's a range of nationalities on offer. 12 characters. Like we said earlier about, Cammy randomly turning Greek for 20 minutes or whatever. How many characters do you get from Spain in any computer game ever?
Really good point,
Yeah, very, very odd selection of people. So the best cocktail I can come up with to match to that is the Cosmopolitan, simply for the aspect of being such a multicultural, interesting group of characters.
I mean, it's also sort of hits that first brief we were talking about as well, because Cosmo is a 90s cocktail.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not have been invented in the 90s, I'm not sure, but it's a 90s cocktail. It's got that very colourful, very drinkable, and so yeah, the Cosmopolitan is definitely a very 90s cocktail. And it's, I guess, quite colourful thing as well, isn't it? So.
Well, that's it. I mean, the 90s were a very, very colourful time. You had like glow-in-the-dark T-shirts and all that sort of shit that went along with the rave culture.
Yeah.
Do you remember the colour-changing T-shirts they used to have?
I do, and the whole thing about people breathing on them in shops and having, plastic put over them for the germs and all that. Imagine that in COVID. I'm going to be going, like, all over a T-shirt. It's funny, isn't it? I remember sort of the furore over Alco Pops. If you weren't there, didn't know, they're basically bottles of shandy, coloured and presented to appeal to the youngest possible audience you could. So, looking back, maybe not such a good thing. But, I mean, they were everywhere, and they did...
They're still around. Wicked, Smirnoff Mule, or whatever, they're all still there.
You just mentioned the best one, the Smirnoff Mule, was part of the Alco Pop thing, but it was... The Mule is a cocktail, ginger beer, vodka and lime juice, and it's beautiful. And what they used to sell, the Smirnoff Mule, wasn't that bad a version of it. It really wasn't, and you can get it for like £2 in the pub, and I used to neck them. So they were really, really good. But yeah, they were one of the first to die out. I don't know if that's because of the legislation or just because they weren't very popular, but
don't know.
But I don't think, for on the spot, Dave, I don't think that's a bad shout, the Cosmo. I like what you've done there. I went for a while. I was looking for something along a similar route, because I think that is one of the big deals about Street Fighter, isn't it? I mean, not just that it has so many characters, and that was new, but that they were from all over the place. Even, I mean, it might seem weird to everyone now who's probably got a Thai restaurant 3 meters down the road from them, but Thailand was not a place people knew in 1993. It really wasn't. And Sagat was from Thailand, and later on Add-on was from Thailand as well. And just places that, they seemed particularly exotic. And I think what Street Fighter did was bring all of its locations to life. Like, all of them. It was, when you think, when I was playing the game earlier, it actually got on my nerves, and it took me a minute to put myself back in my box. But when you're playing against or as Dalsim, and all the elephants making the noise in the background,
oh god, yeah,
it's so annoying. But there was nothing like that before, nothing, and it so perfectly sort of brings that sort of cartoonish version of India to life, as does who we call Bison Stage, with that figure lying on its side in the background. The design is so good. Gale Stage with airplanes in the background is just brilliant, and some of the versions of that in the alpha games are just stunning. And I think it not only is it's not an add-on, do you know what I mean? It's not just, here's Chun-Li, she's from China, moving on, and she just looks like everybody else. There's real depth to it. So I like that, the Cosmopolitan as a choice. I think it's really good, because I think that was really important. The best I could do when I was looking into cocktails, because again, I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head for this. I had to do some research, but I did find the sidecar cocktail has a variant called the Sumo in the sidecar, which I was taken by as a reference to Street Fighter, but it's just a reference. There's nothing about the drinks that really. We like to, when we choose new drinks, make something that feels right, not just sounds right, which is why I also didn't choose the rum punch up, right? Apparently, I've never tried it, but the rum punch up is a rum punch, but with all the fizzy stuff taken out, so it's like turns it into a short cocktail in a glass rather than a big fizzy thing. That actually sounded quite nice. And there is a drink called a prize fighter, which I, at this moment in time, can't remember anything about, but again, thought about. I quite like the idea of a pun cocktail, but I don't think it really does the job that we set out to do in the first place. So I actually got quite a bit emotional about this one. I thought, what does Street Fighter mean to me? And what Street Fighter means to me, and what Street Fighter reminds me of, is making friends. It's been touched on briefly, and I was probably a little too conscious of going on about it earlier in the episode. But a guy called James Bristow, who's a mate I met by playing Street Fighter 2, and by virtue of playing Street Fighter 2 and SNES games with Jim, as we called him, I met the likes of Kev Church, Monty, Alan Adele, as his real name is, and that whole group of people who have been sort of in and around my life. I won't say ever since, because we've fallen out of touch a bit, but Monty did drop me a line earlier in the year and said, we're going out, do you want to come? And they're still in my life, and these are friends I made that I wouldn't have made if Street Fighter 2 didn't exist. I realised that, and I went for it searching for a cocktail that embodied that. And our old friend, the non-sponsor of the show, Mr. Simon Difford, as sort of on his website, Difford's Guide, has a cocktail called The Old Friend, and I did try it. Bloody lovely, so I'm happy to endorse it. And it's a very it's actually it's a really new cocktail. I think I mentioned in the pilot episode that I tend to lean towards sort of classic purist versions of things, but it's a very spirit forward cocktail, which I do like, and it's got pink grapefruit, lemon, citrusy. It's really, really, really nice. And as I say, it's called The Old Friend, and so this is my pairing for Street Fighter 2, because I reckon that I'm not the only one, because it was that big a game, and it was, I think it brought people together in a good way and created friendships, and I bet there are people who still have those friendships today, as I do. But yeah, The Old Friend, you'll find it on Difford's Guide. Give it a Google. Go and make one. Not a lot of complicated ingredients either. I think the elderflower syrup is probably the most complicated thing in there.
Yeah, that's not a common one.
But if you you'll find instructions on how to make it on every homesteading YouTube channel in existence. But it's great. It's really easy to make yourself, and then you can go away and you can make yourself an Old Friend, which is a lovely, lovely cocktail. And I think, for me personally, and I hope for other people out there, pairs beautifully with what Street Fighter 2 brought to my life.
Very nice, mate. No, I like it. It's good. One of the things you're saying there about like bringing people together, I can remember playing Street Fighter 2 in an off license or a chip shop or something. I'm sure it was just a shop, a corner shop somewhere in Bedford, and just random people you didn't even know would just come up. Oh, you want to play? Yeah, sure. And in arcades, there was never any sort of like aggression around it. It was kind of interesting for a fighting game and a very competitive one-on-one fighting game. It was always very much, that was a really good fight. How do you do that move that you did with the thing? That's what I used to love about it.
I don't think that's unusual. I think that experience, I think a lot of people can relate exactly to that. And it was that thing of, again, I'm not going to use the term these days, although I guess technically I just did. Imagine in the environment of an arcade and going up and taking your, what would probably be a £5 note adjusted for inflation now, and sticking it to the screen and going, that's mine, my turn's up next. Yeah. You know what I mean? You used to line the coins up along the screen for when your go was, and then had to remember which one was yours.
So it's like the pound coins on a pool table.
I remember playing Golden Axe in Mr. Pool. That's brought us full circle. Look at that person. And accidentally taking someone's credit because I died and I was annoyed, and I just pressed the start button like as a reaction, because it was communal credits. You put your money in, they put their money in, and but yeah, actually, and I was mortified. He was annoyed at me But I was properly mortified, not afraid. I was just like, oh, I've broken the fucking etiquette. You don't do that. You do not steal someone's credit. Yeah, and I think that, it's very much, I mean, as much as there was a slightly stabby element to arcade in those days, but it was also a very friendly time, and people were like that, weren't they? And people would give you tips on how to do things and how to beat parts of games, and they were just, and I think, again, Street Fighter was very sensible. When it first came out, nobody knew anything.
No, it was very much a communal learning project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I saw it again, actually, with Killer Instinct, which I'm not a fan of, but I did see the same thing again, where people would go to the arcade with pages and pages of printouts or possibly even retyped pages to teach themselves combos and moves and stuff like that. And it's nuts when you think about it. And again, this whole pre-internet era where everything was difficult and you didn't, I mean, these days you probably just pay some money and it would unlock a combo for you.
Tap here to unlock content.
Oh, I just did an unintentional these days as well. Somebody out there is hammered. Not just me. My turn to choose.
It is.
And I think after going backwards and forwards a little bit on some PlayStation games and some SNES games, I think we're going to stick with something that originated in the arcade and go with Chase HQ for our next time out, and obviously its various special criminal investigation spin-offs and sequels. So, dear listener, I hope you can join us next time where we're going to be talking about all that Tato goodness. I look forward to that immensely. Thanks very much for listening, and apologies again for the poor audio. It will not happen again.